Hello and welcome to the economic future of the Coachella Valley. Today we'll learn about how our local nonprofit organizations are adjusting their fundraising and programming to serve their missions to find cures, ease suffering, and improve the quality of life for those who live in our desert community in light of the impact of COVID-19. With that, let's welcome our panel of experts. Please welcome Laura Fritz, Senior Vice President at Eisenhower Health Foundation. Then we'll speak with Debbie Espinosa, President and CEO with Foodbank. And finally, we'll talk with Jan Hawkins, Director of Development at the Living Desert. Laura, Debbie, and Jan, welcome. Laura, we're going to start with you. Can you tell me about Eisenhower's Foundation, who's behind it, what are its objectives, and who benefits from it?
Eisenhower has really a fascinating beginning as a hospital. And probably the best recounting of that was published in November of 2015 in Palm Springs Life magazine. So it's really a great history. It was started by a medical event. There was a foursome of golfers playing Thunderbird Country Club. And it was Clark Swanson and Mr. Firestone and former President Dwight Eisenhower and Bob Hope. And he suffered a cerebral hemorrhage on the sixth green. He was only a couple hundred yards away from his home. And by the time he made it from Thunderbird to the hospital in Palm Springs, he had passed and he was not able to be revived. So his widow realized that minutes really do matter in healthcare, and she set about gathering a community of really good-hearted people who just happened to be exceptional business people, entertainers, and politicians, and they set about to fundraise for the hospital. So we are almost 50 years old. The first big funder was the Desert Golf Classic, and Dolores Hope became the chair of our board of trustees. She put her husband, Bob Hope, as the chairman of the Desert Classic, and here we are now 50 years later. The hospital was founded as a not-for-profit hospital to serve the entire Coachella Valley. Anyone who presented themselves at the door was to be served. It also included in that mission education and prevention and research and things like that, which we continue to do today. I think that's maybe about it. Anyway, then the hospital is something that's really important. The hospital, because of its not-for-profit status, we're affected by our payer mix, and our payer mix is the ability of patients to pay. So 65% of our patients are Medicare, and 15% are Medicaid. So we live off of a government reimbursement. Only 12% of our patients have private insurance. And the reason that's significant is because private insurance pays about 200 times more than the government pay. So we operate off of very, very small margins. The other 8% are those who do not have the ability to pay. And that's absorbed into our operational costs. So we were founded by fundraising, we've been built by philanthropy, and we continue to have to fundraise because we just don't have the money from operations to be the type of hospital that we want to be. And we don't want to be just a community hospital. We have grown to have wonderful centers of excellence, to have national rankings in several disciplines, state rankings, and we're the #1 hospital in the Inland Empire, and we're the only not-for-profit hospital.
So the obvious question then, Laura, is how has the pandemic affected the foundation's ability to fundraise and meet its mission?
Well, in difficult times, there's really a greater need. And we quickly understood that we were the most relevant organization to address that need because it was a healthcare crisis. And we have experience in healthcare. We've been saving lives every day. So we had an emergency department. We had infectious disease physicians. We had policies and procedures in place. We had a tremendous amount of experience from the recent SARS epidemic. We have epidemiologists. So we knew that we were the most relevant organization to take the lead, and we did. And the community was actually, as all of you, people want to know how they can help, in what ways can they help? And so we created what I call philanthropic pathways. And the very first philanthropic pathway was a really life-saving equipment, and it was ventilators. So we put out a call for 50 ventilators. Within less than a week, we raised $3.5 million for those 50 ventilators. Well, that was more than what we needed. So we asked a lot of the people who came in day 4 and day 5 and day 6, could we move your money into a different fund? And we called that our response fund. Now the response fund helped us purchase PPE, the masks, the face shields, the gowns. As everyone remembers, there was a tremendous amount of competition and hoarding and price gouging for all this equipment because they were creating scarcity, just like they did with toilet paper and paper towels. And so we were paying exorbitant prices to have those things. But that we used that response money to do that. We used that response money to build separate entrances for those that are healthy and those that had been diagnosed. We increased our ICU space. We increased our observation space. We built a drive-through testing out in our parking lot. All of those things had costs. So we used the funding from the response fund to cover those kinds of costs. The fourth fund that we created was the recovery fund. So we immediately asked all elective surgeries to stop. We asked people who were otherwise healthy not to come to the hospital. We wanted to donate or wanted to commit all of our resources towards those people that were sick. And so our revenues dropped. We didn't have people in beds in the hospital. And our expenses went up. We had to pay for all of those lab tests. You know, we had to buy more dialysis machines. We had to pay for the testing to be completed. Where else did we spend money in the recovery fund? Just to cover operationally, because we didn't have the daily census that we had before to cover us. So we actually raised $9.5 million for our recovery fund. And I would say, so opening up those philanthropic pathways for those people that couldn't participate in that way but wanted to participate, we met them where they were. If they were a volunteer, we directed them to groups that were making masks, were making gowns. We had our Lowe's and Home Depot and Joann's Fabrics all come forward with in-kind donations so that people could do those kinds of things for us. The restaurants stepped forward. How can we feed your frontline workers? What can we do? You know, so we met the donors where they were. When they called, we established a whole in-kind program, and if it was clean and safe and something appropriate for the hospital, then we accepted those donations. I think key, maybe I should take a break, but I really think key was our communication. Leadership, the president of the foundation immediately started communicating. The letters were coming out twice a week, and then once a week, and then every 3 weeks, and now maybe every 6 weeks. But they were so effective, and we know that because people called us and told us, you're such a calming force in the community. You know, you've answered our questions, you've put us at ease, you've shared what you don't know. You're telling us how the hospital's responding. We were doing shout outs to first responders, the firefighters, the EMTs, our frontline workers. We were telling patient stories. They really appreciated the transparency. Again, we acknowledged what we didn't know. We let them know that this was a huge impact in their lives, and we knew that it was changing, you know, things were changing for them and decisions had to be made. Another communication area, we opened up a hotline. We had over 80,000 phone calls to that hotline, staffed 24 hours a day by registered nurses, so people could get information. All of these things built a tremendous amount of trust. You know, our doctors were being profiled on TV. We had articles in the LA Times about Eisenhower. We increased our direct mail. We increased our presence on social media. We wanted to let people know that they were safe. We wanted to let people know what they could do if there was a crisis in their family and how we could protect them. So I think communication was key, and I think people responded with donations because of that as well. And because it was a healthcare issue. It was a healthcare crisis.
Well, those are amazing efforts. It's wonderful to hear how our community responded and how creative and clever you all were in getting the specific areas fulfilled. So when the foundation is looking at the ever-changing circumstances that the pandemic is causing, what changes in your hallmark fundraising or policy making are you now looking at, or do you see happening on the way ahead?
Well, for the reasons that I stated, we didn't see a decline. And I know that that's not typical of everybody. But historically, you don't really see declines during crisis. During the recession, the Great Recession, I mean, the equity markets dropped 400% and fundraising only declined 4%. So yes, there may be organizations that are suffering from the pandemic, but I really think it's just been a redistribution of the funds. There are a lot of crises that are going on right now, and people are nationally, and people are stepping up. I mean, there's $5 billion been donated just in recent months to the racial injustice that's going on. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of donations going towards climate change and towards gender equity, whether it's workforce diversity or gay marriage or rape. I mean, so there are causes that are in crisis, as well as food shortages, certainly, that are being even either more exposed or happening simultaneously. So people are giving, people are making transformational gifts. They want to play a role in all of this. So it just, we're not changing our efforts in fundraising. We'll continue to, I mean, the people that have supported consistently and historically are individuals, and we are ever concentrating on having those conversations and making sure that those people know what their gifts have done in the past, the good that they can do in the world with future gifts, and making them feel proud of the organizations that they've chosen to give their gifts to, make sure that they know how grateful we are.
So that's great news, Laura. You anticipated the next question about the trend that would seem apparent about nonprofits having declines in giving. And it's nice to hear that your experience and observation is that it's not so much that, but for local organizations that are experiencing that, where they had major gifts or individual donors, what other alternatives can our fellow local nonprofit organizations look at to keep vital?
I don't have any offers of, grant-making organizations other than what most of us all know. My advice to other organizations would just to stick to what's worked and stick to the donors that you already have and that trust you, and to share the relevance of your organization during this time, how it's impacting you and what you're doing about that. I would certainly, again, acknowledge that the stress that they're under, that, I read this story, it just stuck with me for years and years. When Bernie Madoff, the scandal of Bernie Madoff, and so many people lost their entire financial wherewithal, their retirement money, everything they ever had. And they were big philanthropists. I mean, they had the ability to make gifts. And some of the organizations looked at that and stopped giving or stopped calling them, because they felt like, well, either it's an inappropriate time to ask or they don't have the money anymore, and so they quit communicating. There was one organization that this article highlighted that called and said, our gala's coming up, and you've been a big part of this organization, and we would like you to be our guest. And that's what you have to do. You have to show people that you care. First and foremost, that you care. You care about them. You care about the clients that you're serving, the difference that you're making in the community. And, I've always said that fundraising is not really an ask. It's just kind of a nudge. You get your people on board. They know, doing good feels good. And so I would just my advice would be, I don't have anything clever. I don't have any hidden organizations that I would direct everybody to go to. I just would say, keep doing what you've been doing, and that is building trust within your donors and acknowledging all their special gifts that they're giving to change this world and to change the community.
Well, I think that's great advice, Laura. So it's great to hear that our facility is doing so well and that the fundraising is continuing to go. So thank you for sharing that with us. Debbie, we are going to switch to you. I've seen Find Food Bank all over the news, as well as other food banks across the nation. Can you talk to us about Find Food Bank itself and how you are managing through this pandemic?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I really appreciate it. With the COVID-19 pandemic, it was very interesting for food banks around the country, simply because typically during a disaster like fires that we all know about right now, food banks and regional food banks, which Find Food Bank is for the desert, will come in and provide support services for the longevity of whatever recovery may be. But it's firefighters and it's Red Cross that's coming in first to provide the instant aid for people that are, displaced. And then we're coming into support services after that to refill food supplies. With the pandemic, what's been interesting for our food banking system is that it flip-flopped everything. Because now where we were support services on regular disasters, with the pandemic, we became a first responder before even police and firefighters, because the main issue that was happening was that job loss was happening so quickly, not just here in the Coachella Valley, but throughout the United States. And one of the biggest issues that was happening was that there wasn't enough food to go around for people who couldn't afford to buy it anymore before anything else. And in addition to what people were going through with the health crisis, with what Laura was just talking about, trying to manage through and understand what the healthcare system was like. So for us, when we flip-flop positions, typically the food banking world would have the ability to draw upon our neighboring regional food banks to be able to help support and supply each other. For instance, if it's an isolated fire in Northern California, we've sent trucks of water up in order to be able to help refill supply for the longevity. When all the food banks are going through it equally and wholly in the Feeding America Network system, all of a sudden we found ourselves on our own without any kind of supports, because we had to be directed to our own communities. And then, like Laura was saying, there was this complete changeover with regards to the hoarding of food and the way in which people were seeing food for those that could afford it still. And so all of a sudden there was a loss of donations that was coming through. For us, what was interesting was our fundraising capabilities stayed the same throughout the pandemic. In fact, you're seeing us more out there because it's important for us to be able to tell the story. It was important for us to be able to share the amount of change that was happening pre-pandemic, when we were serving about 90,000 people, to during pandemic when we were spiking to 190,000 people. And this is every month. So 90,000 every month to 190,000 every month, with about 8 weeks to prepare for 110% increases of the amount of people that we were serving. And with that, the food supply was shorting. And even when people were donating money to help us purchase food to be able to refill our stock, there was no food to be purchased because everybody was out, including the grocery stores. So for us, with regards to Find being the regional food bank and how we work throughout our desert region, we cover over a 5,000 square mile region. We go all the way to the border of California, Arizona to Blythe, all the way up to the Morongo Basin, Joshua Tree, 29 Palms area, out to the windmills and up to Anza, which of course is 74 going over to San Diego, and everything in that we serve to ensure that there's equitable food distribution. So not one area of the desert is getting more than the other, because everybody equally suffers when you're experiencing hunger. So our food bank, as the regional food bank, ensures that there's enough distribution sites, especially during the time of the pandemic, to be able to make sure that people have equal access to the resources that we're pushing out. And so at the start of the pandemic, that was one of the most critical points for us, was to ensure that we had enough locations. So we went from about 110 distribution sites in that geographic square mile area to over 150 that we're still continuing to serve today. Our goal was to make sure that everywhere in the area, especially here in the central desert region of the Coachella Valley, people had access to free food if they needed it within a 3-mile radius of where they were living. And right now, when we're looking at our heat maps and we're looking at our GIS mapping, we're almost there. Find ourselves, we launched an extra 20 mobile markets in addition to the 20 that we had already going on the normal, in order to make sure that we could offset. So, you know, it's a longer question, but there was just so much that happened in like a short amount of time that when you ask a question like that, I'm like, I don't even know where to begin. I don't even know where to stop. There's just so much with regards to find and the position that we're at right now with food systems.
Yeah. So you've talked about the rapid growth that there was no preparation. Now that you've been in it longer, how has COVID affected your ability to do the regular fundraising and really meet your mission at its core?
So what I think is interesting about this community, and what I absolutely really love about this fundraising community, is that they get it when it comes to hunger. And it showed. We had our telethon just at the onset of COVID. Our normal amount that we raised was somewhere between 120,000 to about 200,000, and this year we breached over 500,000. And that was in one day during the start of the pandemic, because people understood, because of the stories that we were sharing and what we were talking about with the amount of the support we needed. It's expensive. You got to be able to fund trucks. You got to be able to pay for diesel fuel. We run, Class B box trucks all over the desert. But if you can tell your story so that people can understand exactly where their money is going, and Find has done that for many years now, that trust that they had in us to be able to execute on that allowed them to be able to provide. And we gave them the opportunity to be able to provide. I think what was great about Telethon was that it allowed anybody at any point. We had people that were donating $1, $5, $10. We had generated so much money by the smaller gifts that it shows the power of this community to be able to help multiple people. And they weren't just funding Find. We would talk to them over the phone and they're like, we're going to give $10 to you. We're going to give $10 to this organization. We're going to give $10 to the other organization. For us, anything helps. And we cherish and we are so thankful for any gift that we get in. And those $10 can add up to a lot. 100, 500. We had some $5,000 donors that were calling on that night too as well, that we hadn't even heard about. But it's because no one wants to see anybody starve in our community. So everybody came together. The other effect that it's had is that the people that we've built trust with over the years, they knew what we were going through because they knew our business. And so they continued to support, and then some of them even increased their giving because they knew when you launch out 22 extra mobile pantries in order to make sure that our agency systems don't get inundated, because we know that they were struggling too. We're working together now, not just as Find Food Bank, the regional food bank in isolation, but with all of our pantry networks, the Narrow Doors, the Coachella Valley Rescue Missions, the Marthas, the LGBTQ centers, DAPs. We give almost 70% of all of our food supply to the local pantries and those organizations, and we knew we had to fundraise on their behalf too, because we knew that they were going to struggle. So the better that we could do the fundraising on our end, right now Find Food Bank is giving scholarships to a lot of our pantry locations too to help stabilize them, because we know their fundraising has gone down. So we're helping to support those organizations as well, because our fundraising has stayed stable. And our food supply luckily has refilled too. You can see the stores refilling, which means that our food bank is refilling too as well. And we're back up to our normal levels of food, which was, just as important as the money. Our biggest struggle right now is the volunteers. We're not back to where our volunteers were before, but a lot of that money that came into as well were our volunteers 65 and older that couldn't volunteer with Find and they're still not able to come back in. They converted their time into dollars And so they went ahead and gave their normal gift and then increased their donations a little bit more because they knew we were going to need the support.
How would you characterize the food system in the Coachella Valley in a term that I learned from Foodbank, which is food insecurity, and particularly during a pandemic?
So food insecurity in our valley sometimes I think is misunderstood. A lot of the times people think that it's just homeless that require food assistance. What they don't realize is that over 97% of the people that we serve are not homeless. They're actually people that are living right on that economic border of just making it and not making it. They live in houses, they have jobs, but as you know, it's a great thing that our valley continues to thrive. Hopefully COVID-19 ends very quickly so we can continue to see that increase of thrivingness that we've had in our valley, but it also means cost of living is also going up too as well. And so we have a lot of our families, a lot of our fixed income seniors, a lot of our children that live right on that border. And that's on the normal. So when COVID-19 hit, all of a sudden we're seeing this new crop of people that were becoming food insecure because of the job loss. So now we're serving those that were living right on the border and then all of the new people that are now living right on that edge. For food systems and food insecurity, free food to families can mean that they can redirect or repurpose funds that they would have spent on food to ensure that they stay in their houses. They have the ability to pay mortgage better. They have the ability to pay rent better. They have the ability to pay car maintenance in order to be able to get to and from their homes to their work to keep their stable income coming in. So that's what food insecurity means. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're not eating all the time. It means that you're having to make trades to be able to know whether or not you can eat, or whether or not you're going to pay another bill, or whether or not you're going to struggle by missing meals maybe for 1 to 2 days. I can tell you during the COVID epidemic, I've met clients that have not eaten for 1 to 2 days in order for the rest of their family, their kids or their mother-in-law that they're taking care of, or somebody's neighbor who is, in a health compromised situation, they're providing food over to them. And so a healthy adult will decide to miss meals. We don't want that to happen, which is the reason why we are out there at 150 locations, so it doesn't have to happen with our mobile pantries and our agency network. The food systems, as part of that, we don't have enough food in our valley to be able to feed the need, even on the regular. We don't have manufacturers, we don't have distributors, they're all located outside of the Coachella Valley. The regional food bank's role is to make sure that we can resource from everywhere. So we get fresh produce from all over the country. We get food from all over the country in order to make sure that 70% of our supply can go out to those agencies. So they don't have to try to find food themselves, we find it for them. So our system is holding now, which is great. It's refilled and it's 100 times better than what it was before, thank goodness, from April, May, and June. And we're seeing it stabilize as we continue to move forward. But this is going to be a marathon. And I think Laura knows that. I think Jan knows that. I think everybody in the industry knows that we could potentially be in a longer marathon than it was a sprint, as what we initially had expected. So with regards to food systems, we are now managing the food supply like it is a marathon. Equitable food distribution is key during this time. And so we're looking at it from that frame too as well.
I always think back to the first time I ever heard someone describe food insecurity, and it impacts you. I feel emotional just listening to you talk about that. So how does Find get these stories out? Because I would imagine the stories of what you've had to endure, which are just even more powerful than what you do on a daily basis, would attract new donors. So what is Find doing to try to get those stories out?
Sure. Direct mail pieces are great because it's going in directly into households. We pair that with any kind of news media that people will be willing to let us share our story with. We definitely make sure we're very prepared whenever we have any kind of opportunity to share those stories publicly, whether it be social media, Facebook Live presentations. We're utilizing social media so much more. Our key is to try to hit multiple generations. We definitely want to engage our millennial generations and our Gen Zers too as well, because they may not be able to give money. But we do know that the more engaged they are when they hear their parents talking about making decisions, they can say, you know what, I heard something from Foodbank, and we really want to make sure that our neighbors don't starve. Do you think you can support them? So you can engage multiple generations, and that is what Find Food Bank is trying to do, utilizing any media that we can. We've had really great articles. In LA Times, we were featured on the cover of Wall Street Journal with our National Guard coming in. We were very limited with who we could bring in, but we worked with our COVID-19 protocols to be able to allow media to come by the food bank and through the food bank to be able to film their stories, because we knew the visuals were important for people to understand the work. So that's how we're doing it. We're just talking to anybody that will allow us to speak.
Well, and you heard me speak with Laura earlier about the impact that COVID is having on nonprofits and their fundraising. And so I'll pose the same question to you. What alternatives do you look at, and can you recommend for the local nonprofits to keep themselves vital when individual donors or larger donors were their bread and butter?
Yeah, I think that you need to just make sure that you engage with the people that are already supporting you. Make sure that you tell them clearly and concisely what it is you need support with and how their money is going to be used. That trust right now is key. There's a lot of people coming into the nonprofit game that haven't had experience before, and they just want to help. And what your donors are trying to do is they're trying to filter between the new people that are kind of coming onto the stage. And I don't want to say that don't support them. Like, we all need to be able to pick who we are. But if you're an existing nonprofit that's struggling, make sure that you have very clearly how you're going to be utilizing that money and how it's going to help support the need and the cause and what it's going to be applied to. But like Laura said, the best ones that you're going to have are the ones that know your work already, and to try to engage with them as best as you can. Make sure that they know what it is that you're doing, and make sure they know that you're there to support. We, as the regional food bank, have worked really hard on trying to tap other donors outside of our area, because like I said, much like our food, we have to go outside of our valley. There's not enough. When you double the amount of work that you're doing, it means that you're doubling your budget in order to be able to support everything that was going out there. Thank goodness we had the National Guard, because I didn't have to hire extra staff. So that was a huge key component. But I did have to reach out to foundations and grantors outside of the Coachella Valley in order to be able to get extra funding streams in. We're lucky that we're part of the Feeding America network. Feeding America also helped raise money with their national donors that was then distributed equitably throughout the U.S. So we were able to bring those outside dollars in to support our need.
Thank you for sharing everything that you've been doing, Debbie. You're doing amazing work, and we all really appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, we have good partners. It's not just us, it's everybody. And I can't, for all of you that may be watching that have supported Find Food Bank and have supported, the foundation and the desert and our zoo, for the 3 speakers that you have, thank you so much, because it takes all of us working together to make this happen. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Jan, let's move to you and let's talk about the living desert.
Oh, I'd love to, and thanks for having us. Oftentimes people don't think about a zoo in terms of crises like this, so this is a great opportunity to share our story. And I echo many of the comments of Laura and Debbie. We've all been in this valley for a long time, and it's a blessing to be here. So on the heels of our 50th anniversary, we had a wonderful gala on March 7th, and 10 days later, the world closed down. And our development department, our marketing department, we never stopped. We hit the road running because we had animals to feed. We have 500 different animals that are just as hungry as our people in our community. And so in response to that, we started an intensive letter writing campaign. Our team was here every single day, bouncing ideas off of each other. We sent out letters to several thousand people. We segmented our audience. We sent letters to people who have a long relationship with us, to past board members. We did about 12 different types of letters to send out. We got on the phone to start calling people. We worked with our board. We called our campaign Mission Animal Care, because we wanted to share the story with the public that, hey, we've got these animals, and our keepers have to be retained, our veterinarians, to give them the best possible health care that we needed. So like the others, we were it was just heartwarming, the response that we received. In a little over 3 months' time, we raised over $1 million. We raised about $1.4 million. And as Debbie and Laura said, it came in the form of $5 bills that were put into envelopes with people saying, this is all that I can afford. I've just lost my job, but I want to help. I want to make sure that the animals are fed. We sprang into action with social media. We decided early on with our marketing department that we had to get one face, one voice out there, and that was Alan Monroe, our CEO, because he does a great job of telling our story. So like the others, the most important thing is just to let the public know. How many people have ever really thought about animals in crisis? This has never happened. So the obvious human element is there, but not the animal component. And we were hearing about zoos from all over the world who were having a tough time and looking at dire potential options. And we wanted to share with people that we do need your help. By closing the zoo those 3 months, we estimated that's about a $2 million deficit in admissions and memberships that typically would come in. We don't receive any ongoing city subsidization, so our budget really comprises the largesse of the community.
So Jan, what has been the impact on the Living Desert with the COVID shutdown, and how have you had to adapt in your fundraising efforts?
So I would say that our fundraising efforts continue as they always have. It's that personal one-on-one, sharing our story, but it has also encouraged us to expand our social media and digital presence. We've adapted many more platforms of getting the story out. So we've done that through Alan Monroe, our CEO, and getting him in front of people. We would do Facebook Live, where we would interview our zookeepers, our animal staff, because they were here every single day. They had to come in, even though we cut our staffing back dramatically. So we had interviews with them live on Facebook. We did email blasts. Every Monday, we did a Monday Minute with starting off with Alan and our animal curator, our director of animal programs, talking to people, because they all have lots of questions. Well, what happens if you don't have enough money to feed the animals? And of course, we would always ensure that happens, but what happens to their medical care? What happens now that you're not open, and when do you anticipate opening? So it gave us a forum to address all those questions that people really haven't had to ever think about. And so our social media, and knowing that all of our audience is at home, sitting at home, and they're learning Zoom, it allowed us to do Zoom meetings with our top donors, with small groups, as you've suggested. We are also in the middle of a major capital campaign. And so going forward, we can't meet with our regular donors, but because most of them our top donors are out of the area anyway, having the opportunity to do a Zoom call is something new, and we can do it in the middle of summer. We can contact them. We can show them what it is that we're doing in bringing our next phase of the capital campaign to fruition. So I think the social media and the digital access has really broadened our scope and our options for fundraising. So it's sort of a silver lining. We've had to jump into it at a little bit faster pace than we had been doing. And so it helps to know that our audience is also on the same wavelength. Many of our volunteers, I know Debbie talked about volunteers. We have a 500, as Eisenhower Health does as well. We have a 500 strong volunteer staff, and they were itching to come back during those 3 months that we were closed. It's so hard for them. We have many volunteers that have been here for decades, and we are their life. And for them to not come in and greet the customer, greet our guests, and help share the stories of all of our animals, it was really tough for them. So we set up Zoom meetings. Our director who handles all the volunteers can now do a weekly report to the volunteers. Many of the volunteers are not comfortable coming back on site, but a number of them are. They do help. They run the front desk. They handle incoming phone calls. They help development department, and they're out there as well, greeting the guests now. And so staying in contact them with Zoom calls and emails was an important facet of keeping them engaged, as well as fundraising. And I think, as Debbie said, for those that couldn't help and didn't feel comfortable coming in to work in the zoo, they increased their giving. They moved up perhaps to a monthly giving structure, which helps us with sustainability month after month.
So it sounds like the one-on-one Zooming or small groups has really helped the Living Desert with their volunteer pool to keep informed, keep engaged, and appreciated. Have you found that that's a really good vehicle to keep donors engaged and find new ones who are learning about the daily care in a way that they may not have known?
I think it will grow in importance. I would say we're planning on, as we get into season and we've gotten past the rough patches, we are definitely planning on establishing more Zoom calls with our top donors for presentations, as I mentioned, for our upcoming capital campaign. It's a great way to do small groups that are interested in helping us and learning more, because we've started construction, and we also have a new Habitat Australia, which was planned to be open the week after we closed the zoo. So people are slowly coming back in to see our new Australia habitat. The other area that I should have spoken about is our education mission. We no longer have school field trips. So typically on a school year, we have 30,000 plus students from local and far schools, all the way, up to Santa Barbara, down to the bottom of California, San Diego. We would have children come in to learn more about desert species. We no longer have those school field trips. And so we've had to pivot, and we're in the middle, with the help of some generous grantors, to develop our online virtual learning capacity for our zoo camps that we usually do during the summer, as well as virtual school field trips. So we'll be going into classrooms, we'll be offering it to homeschool students and parents, trying to get families much more engaged and seeing the zoo virtually, at least, if they can't make it here en masse in the typical school field trips.
So when you look across the valley, Jan, in terms of giving, have you seen more donors stepping up whilst perhaps the larger donors are pulling back? And what do you see for the future of the local nonprofits?
So we had about 1,800 responses to our Mission Animal Care campaign, and 600 of those were brand new donors. So it was an amazing, as I think Debbie and Laura have noticed, it's an amazing response from our small, tightly knit helping community. We had not really expected that. Those 600 new donors, half of them are new members, half of them are just new donors to us. And I have absolute confidence that our top donors will continue their consistent support for us. I would say the one area that we're all struggling with is the events portion of fundraising. And perhaps that's not a bad thing, because what it's forcing us to do is really to strengthen our one-on-one face-to-face donors, which is where we should always be anyway. In this particular valley, because of the plethora of events, sometimes I think we spend maybe too much time on the event part of it. And so we're all pivoting, and what events really allow you to do is to share your story. And so we're looking now for the new ways to share stories. I am online all the time, viewing other zoos and their virtual events, their television events, trying to figure out what works, what can we take from those events and turn that to our advantage, so that if I can't get people here on campus, 500 strong, all having a great time with dinner, how else can we share our story of what the Living Desert does, our conservation, our education of children, and get that across? And I think that that's making us smarter in how we do that. I don't see it as a deficit. We just have to change things around. And I would imagine that going forward, we'll all incorporate some of these changes in the future. I don't know that we'll all go back to the same, massive gala that we've done before.
Interesting fact that I'll share before I open it up for you all to say closing comments is the Living Desert is responsible for my husband winning and pulling me from the East Coast to the desert, because I saw it as a huge animal lover. I didn't see it as a zoo. I saw it as a structure built with animals in their natural habitat to keep humans away from them versus typical zoos keeping them away. So I know it brought me to the community, and I think the more your story gets out there in the same way of enlightening people about food insecurity, that more people will give. So I really appreciate your efforts and everything you're doing for the animals as a huge animal lover. So what I'd like to do now is just open up. We'll go back, Laura, to you, then to Debbie and Jan to close, about any further comments that you would like to share with our viewers today about your individual nonprofits and what you'd like them to know about how you continue to persevere through this pandemic and how you're going to survive and continue to be a strong organization for the Coachella Valley.
Well, thank you again. I really enjoyed listening to everyone and having the opportunity to, even in my preparation, understand more about what our organization does on a daily basis and how those efforts impacted the community. I too want to say thank you to all the people who did step forward, those people that have such a giving heart and we're looking for ways to make a difference and to have an impact. And we just are very, very appreciative of the support. Healthcare is an expensive organization and endeavor. And we're just very, very grateful to everyone who continues to understand that and support our mission in the community. We welcome other partnerships. We try to support other organizations, those that are also dealing with healthcare and other crises, and we appreciate all those partners as well, because they do a lot for us that we're not able to do. Our mission doesn't allow us to move in that area, and we're very grateful that they're there to pick things like that up.
Thank you, Laura. Debbie?
It's interesting. I just ran our numbers in preparation for this, and in between 2018 and 19, we resourced and distributed about 10 million pounds of food, and that was already a 5 to 10% increase from 17-18. I just ran our numbers for the last 12 months for the same time frame of 19 to 20, and we're at 16.5 million meals. A lot of that is attributed to the amount that we did for COVID-19 support because numbers were doubling. The amount of work, not just by Foodbank, but by all of us. I mean, Jan, I'm listening to your stories and I'm like, my gosh, it's healthcare needs with Eisenhower for people that are suffering with regards to health. It's Jan and animals. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, who is going to feed the animals? They are part of our role in our community too. I'm thinking about feeding people. And we're in it for the marathon. We can't let down our support of all of our nonprofit communities together in the Coachella Valley, because we have to work together as teams to be able to not just fundraise here in our valley, but to bring light of our situation through all of that media that we're doing. I mean, all of us, the three of us, have gotten national news from different places. And when our local nonprofits try to reach out to other people outside of our valley to keep trying to help us sustain, it's all of us working together to call the attention to our Coachella Valley that will make us all successful. So for me as a nonprofit, yes, I'm focusing on feeding people, but I'm also listening to other nonprofit stories to see where can Foodbank help support you two as well, because we rise together as a valley and we fall together as a valley. And for us with COVID-19 to bring ourselves out of this and to overcome this economic impact, it's going to take all of us working together. So find us here for everybody. We appreciate all of the help and support that the community has given us. And together we're going to be able to make a difference throughout everybody's lives and the animals' lives too. Can't forget our friends.
Thank you, Debbie. Jan, what's your final comments would you like to share?
So I'm honored to be part of the fabric of this community. I've been here for many years, and sometimes it takes crises like this to pull us all together. It's certainly taken us out of many of our silos, and it's imperative to look at the community as a whole. I appreciate the support from the entire community. We couldn't do it without everybody, and it's been a blessing to be here and to be part of this threesome. I love to hear what you're all doing, and there's many silver linings in this COVID crisis, and because we're in development, we're perennial cheerleaders, I think, and so we always look at the good side, and there are many good aspects that have come out of this, and one of them is to be able to work in this community and to make a difference. Thank you. Thanks for allowing us the opportunity to share our stories.
Well, again, Jan, Laura, and Debbie, thank you so much for your participation today and all the great work that you've done. On behalf of Palm Springs Life Magazine and Coachella Valley Economic Partnership, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.
For Timo's Air Conditioning, the Valley is home, and customers are family. When we opened our doors in 1998, we had one mission: to serve you better every day. 2 decades later, that mission still stands. And when it comes to AC replacement, more homeowners choose Timo's over every competitor. Hard work, honest prices, and old school values. That's the Timo's way.